We like to think we know a lie when we hear one, but most misinformation doesn't show up looking like a lie. It sounds reasonable. It confirms something we already suspected. It comes from a friend or a family member, a celebrity, or someone else speaking with complete confidence. By the time we stop to question it, if we question it at all, it's already been shared 1,000 times. And that's what makes misinformation so powerful. It doesn't just fool individuals, it changes conversations. It changes elections. It changes how we see our neighbors, how we trust experts, and whether we can even agree on the basic facts. More and more people aren't just arguing over what should be done, they're arguing over what's actually true. We're losing our common humanity, and we have no one else to blame but ourselves. So it's up to us, all of us, to reclaim that common ground together. Are you an atheist who's tired of being misrepresented by theists? Are you a believer that wants to set the record straight about your religion or your beliefs? If so, give us a call, because this is Talk Heathen, and the show starts right now. All right. Welcome, everyone. Today is June 28th, 2026, and we want to welcome you to Talk Heathen. I'm your host, Scott Dickie, and joining me today is the inimitable, the invaluable, and dare I say, the inevitable, Christy Powell. Christy, how are you doing today?
Hey, congratulations on your tongue twister there. I really appreciate that. I appreciate the introduction. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm excited too. I love being on shows with you, Christy, and it always makes for an interesting conversation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you interact with callers with compassion and thoughtfulness. So I'm looking forward to this. But Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, speaking of callers, and we have open lines, so get your calls in at 512-991-9242, or you can call from your computer at aca.show/call. And we are streaming today, so a big shout out to our viewers on TikTok and on YouTube Mobile. If you're watching us on TikTok this afternoon and you'd like to talk to us, then request to join and we'll bring you up on stage. Please do make sure that you're over 18 before doing so. Well, of course, on Talk Heathen, we're open to all of your questions about religion, secular humanism, atheistic morality, cosmology, philosophy, science, etc. The list just goes on and on. So give us a call if you want to talk about any of those subjects. Talk Heathen is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. So, Christy, as we begin the show here, as we get some callers coming in, I talked a little bit about misinformation in the cold open, and I wanted to talk to you about that a little bit today. But before we do that, why don't you just give me your initial thoughts about if somebody says the word misinformation to you, what comes to mind?
Oh, I mean, honestly, my sort of knee-jerk anecdote, or the first thing that comes up for me, is a conversation I had with my mom just yesterday, where she was telling me that now, whenever she sees a meme about how this food has a terrible chemical in it, or how this is surprisingly dangerous and unhealthy for you, instead of just believing it, she goes to ask ChatGPT if it's true.
Right.
And I guess, I felt a little bit of relief when she said that, because I do feel like I spend a lot of time saying, like, Mom, yes, you want to try and eat as many healthy, all-natural foods as you can, and no, these preservatives are not going to give you dementia. Is going to ChatGPT to confirm these things the best strategy for escaping misinformation? I'll acknowledge it's a step, and I think that's just sort of the reality of the world that we live in right now, that we get so much of our information, so much of our tips about daily life from these, very watered down, very clippable, very small segments of information that are displayed in neat text over AI generated pictures. And that's how we consume information. And then when it comes time to test, is this good information, we type it into a chatbot. I'm not saying everybody, I'm not saying all, I'm not recommending this as a strategy. I am just acknowledging that we live in a modern world, and oftentimes that is the most expedient, or really the only practical way of evaluating information. And, we're much the poorer for it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but on the other hand, though, at least it show, like you were saying, you're satisfied that she was at least doing something, right? At least it shows, first of all, a recognition that things that you're told might not be true, for one
Yeah,
thing.
it maybe isn't like fully evolved research skepticism,
Right,
but it is some sort of proto skepticism, or at least a willingness to hold on to some disbelief.
right,
And
right.
on an emotional level, I find that to be incredibly significant.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely. I think it's big. It's very significant because it shows a mindset that is at least considerate of those facts. The presence of misinformation, but also at least at least a shred of a desire in there to take steps to counter misinformation. So at least she was checking something, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
idea that I can check up on this, I can ask, this chat bot or whatever it is. At least there was an attempt to ask something.
Yeah, and the reality is we live in this information age where we have all of this data readily available at our fingertips, and we still have 24 hours in a day. In many ways, we have less leisure time or less time for these academic pursuits, and we still have more and more data coming in, and we're being
Right.
inundated with all of this information, accurate and inaccurate. And so I do think that there is a logistical sort of practicality to all of this. We as a species did not evolve to take in all of this like advanced nutritional research, let alone so many of the other topics. Looking at you, quantum mechanics, and all of these things that sort of come across our feeds or that we might encounter in casual daily life. Our brains did not evolve to be able to casually dip in and understand these topics. And
Hmm.
it's a real question of how do we be curious about the world? How do we like learn interesting things and find out about cool experiments and take a like sincere engagement with the mysteries of the universe
Right.
without feeling like we have to get a PhD in every good goddamn thing, because you can't.
Christy, I think you summed it up so perfectly right there. We're gonna have to wrap up today's show. We've said everything we need. Oh wait. Oh, we got more time to fill. But yeah, no, I think that was dead on right there. I mean, and the key word that jumped out to me in there was curiosity, right? It's a desire to know things, a desire to learn things, and curiosity takes effort to employ. I mean, if you want to actually learn things, it does take a little bit of effort. But I wanted to touch on something else that you mentioned in there. This idea that we have this massive amount of information that we're left to navigate on our own, and it's difficult. We have our ways of thinking. We have ways that we maybe have learned in school or have learned online or have learned from our friends or learned from our parents or whatever. Different ways of navigating this mass of information that's now at our fingertips. And we're human beings. Human beings are lazy thinkers. As a math teacher, I see it every day. People in general are lazy thinkers, myself included. I'm a human too. So it's very easy for us to take those shortcuts. But before we dive into that, I want to bring up our backup host today, Stephen Harder. I believe, Stephen, this is your first time being on Talk Heathen. If we can pull up Stephen here in just a second.
Yeah, well, while we get him
While we're
loaded
waiting,
up,
yep.
let me ask you this. Like, I'm not disagreeing with your usage of the term lazy, but I'm also curious about the word efficient or maybe pragmatic, because
Yes.
yeah, we're cutting corners and that can lead to mistakes, but also we live in a world of infinite desires, infinite curiosities, and finite resources, finite amounts of time. Stephen, how does that distinction or dichotomy strike you?
I definitely like to tell myself that I'm being efficient. Absolutely. Like, but
Yes.
and it also like taps into like some nihilistic tendencies too. Like ultimately, in 100 years, is it going to matter? Yeah, like yeah, like I'm all for being efficient that way. And does it
Agreed.
also mean that I'm
Agreed.
lazy? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't mean lazy in some kind of moral judgment or anything. I was meaning exactly what you were talking about, Christy and Stephen. You know, the by lazy means just we have a natural tendency to take the easy route. George Carlin had a great joke about how you know, people climb Mount Everest because it's hard. So why do they climb the easy side? Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, that kind of thing. It's because we naturally, you know, water flows downhill. It's not just human beings. It's, you know, things throughout the, you know, throughout our natural experience have a tendency to take the easy way out. Now the question is the easy way as effective as the difficult way? And I think we know that that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the case, but not always the case. But I wanted to ask specifically, we were talking about this mass of information, and one thing specific about that is that in general, it's really easy to make up bullshit, right? It's easy to spread misinformation.
Sure.
It can be difficult to correct that misinformation. For example,
A
the
lie
idea
gets
of
around the world in the time it takes the truth to get its shoes on.
exactly. That's it. And so we've seen things like the Gish Gallop, right? That we've anybody who's interacted in the atheism theism space has seen something similar to a Gish Gallop, where you know you just throw a bunch of crap and see what sticks to the wall. If you make a bunch of statements rapid fire, it can be difficult to fact check them as we go, and it's getting harder with the advent of AI and that kind of thing. We can make up misinformation at a much faster rate than we can debunk that misinformation. Christy, what are your thoughts on that particular unbalanced balancing act?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it comes from the way that we are taught to kind of memorize facts, you know, rather than being taught critical thinking skills or epistemology and how to find good information. We're often taught that, you know, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and it gets like stuck in our brain. I imagine it's perhaps somewhat different in a math classroom, but I have to assume that you witness that as like a major part of our education system.
You mean as far as using rote memorization as a tool?
Yeah, because if we are taught in such a way where it's like, here is a list of facts that you must know in
Right.
order to pass this test, then learning becomes about just having a list of facts, being able
Right.
to
Yeah.
consume and recall a bunch of facts. And the reality is, we now live in a world where the number of facts at our fingertips is just, you know, leaps and bounds beyond anything that we've ever experienced in human history. There's so many facts right there at our fingertips, but which ones are true? And what do
Right.
they mean? And what to do
Right.
with them?
Right. So then it becomes a process of data management, right? We need to filter all of this information. We need to prioritize this kind of information. And by doing so, that's where things like our biases and our preconceived notions, and that can come in and can take a play there. But one thing I like to say in my math classes is, and it's on my t-shirt here, show your work, right? It's the idea that the process of getting the information, the process of checking the information, the process of demonstrating a claim is arguably much more important than the fact itself. You know, and so if we focus on method over result, that can make a difference. And Lisa, I see you online. We'll get to your call in just a second. So just hang in there, Lisa. We'll be right with you. Stephen, I wanted to see what you had to say about that idea, the idea of focusing on method over result. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like it's for me, especially as an artist, it's always about, you know, the how are you getting to your destination, and why does this matter to you? And I think, and yeah, and maybe like interrogating the why can also be important as well. Like it's one thing to hold to this fact or say that this fact is important, but do we actually understand why is this important to me? Because so often when we are being incentivized in order to feel strongly about this or that, like those facts could be true. Those facts can comport to reality, but
Hmm.
why is it so important? And if we are only focusing on the particular lens that we're viewing this fact through,
Right.
we might be missing what's holding that lens up in front of us. So yeah, just having that deeper understanding of what's going on inside of me that makes me want to latch onto this fact can also be very important to understand.
Yeah, definitely. And that leads us perfectly into our call here with Lisa, who I'll bring on. Lisa is an atheist from Kansas, she, her. Lisa wants to ask how otherwise smart people can exclude religion from their logical processes. And I think that what Stephen was saying is going to lead us directly into this call. So I'd like to keep Stephen up while we're talking to Lisa here. So Lisa, can you hear us okay? How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm actually not from Kansas. I'm from Canada.
Canada. Okay.
I
All
think
right.
they-
Canada.
they-
Big difference there. Big difference.
Yes,
Yes,
get it
it's a very
straight.
big difference.
All right. So,
Yeah.
so Lisa, can you expand a little bit about what you wanted to ask us about?
Well, I'm kind of curious about the psychology behind it, like how someone can be so evidence-based in their everyday life, but they're willing to suspend evidence when it comes to their faith system. Like, I don't
So you're saying there's obvious evidence supporting religion, and you're suggesting that atheists are just disregarding it.
Well, basically, like, can I give an example?
Definitely. Yeah, please do.
I know a physician in my city, and I don't understand how she can also be religious because I'm like, STEM is pretty right or wrong based on evidence, peer reviewed. But then when it comes to church, she's willing to suspend all of that logic to believe in a faith system that has almost no evidence to support it and that is not logically consistent anyway. I don't know how people can, like, is it a compliance thing?
So what was this person's?
Why is faith this sort of set aside thing? Pardon the metaphor, but why is it a sacred cow where we don't apply the critical thinking skills to this part of life?
Yeah, basically.
That's what you're asking? Is why don't we apply logic to that situation?
Yes. Yeah. I don't.
Well, can you give us an example of this of the evidence that's being disregarded?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you give us you're saying that atheists, or at least the atheists that you've encountered, approach this this particular topic differently than they would another topic?
No, I think she's saying that believers believe despite being otherwise rational people, at least in many cases.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about how religious people can hold those beliefs and not how atheists. Okay,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I
Yes.
missed that.
Like the person I was giving an example of, she is I won't name. I'm not going to name anyone. Just she's a psychiatrist, right? But if she heard someone saying that a snake spoke to them, she would probably admit them. But but for some reason in the Bible, for some reason she'll believe it happened in the Bible and then that it was not a psychiatric issue. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Christy, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on that? How could somebody have that kind of different approach to different subjects?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify, but I think there's something so obvious and fundamental here that it's worth circling because of how significant it is. And that is just because they've been given permission. You know, there is this voice in our culture, in your immediate community, in the people that you're going to church with, that will explicitly tell you, hey, over here we go by faith. And here's what faith is. And we're going to define it in these like very specific, but also super vague and not very testable sort of language. And we're told that that's okay. We're told that it's all right to view faith through a less scientific lens. And, you know, certainly we're painting with very broad brushes, and there's a lot of opportunity for exception finding and all of these kinds of things. I myself grew up in a very fundamentalist, evangelical type society where we absolutely believed in the like literal and sort of scientific interpretations of the Bible, which are somewhat out of step with most religious traditions historically and in modernity. But in either case, it is told to us sort of repeatedly that if what you think with your, if you think for yourself, if you are applying scientific rigor, if you are going in with skepticism, then you don't have faith. You don't have faith even the size of a mustard seed. You can't move mountains. You can't do what God has called you to do, and that's considered a real problem. And so we are kind of pressured to let go of that kind of thinking. And we are meant to assume that if our eyes tell us something different than what we are seeing in the Bible or what we understand to be true from church leadership and everything else, that we should lean not on our own understanding and in all of our ways acknowledge him, because he will make our paths straight.
Yeah. Sorry, Lisa, what are your thoughts on that? What Christy had to say?
That's interesting, because I'm an atheist now, but I grew up Catholic, and the way we were taught about the Bible is that some of the stories are just oral narratives that have symbolic meaning, and some of them actually did happen, which that in itself was kind of confusing too, because it's like, well, who gets to pick and choose what's real and what isn't real if the Bible is eternal, unchanging, and perfect?
Yeah, whichever one you just disproved, that one was symbolism. But don't worry.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That seems to be a common reply there.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't grow up in a very strict evangelical setting. Yeah. The other thing, I don't know. It just it's weird to me. It seems weird to me how someone they could operate with their logical functions and questions and any other facet of their life, but they'll be willing to suspend reason when it comes to faith. And I don't know, maybe it's like a fear of loss of identity, or I don't know, but
yeah, it is that in part. I mean, it is so many things. Like I want to believe. I want to be part of a community of believers. I want the warm fuzzies of knowing that I have a all-powerful God who loves me on my team and thinking about me all the time. And I want to do what I have to do to stay in good with this alpha God in our dumb primate brain so that I can be on board and not get sent to hell. I mean, there are all of these like social and emotional pressures that get involved here. And honestly, there is just this sense of there are things that we don't know. And boy, wouldn't it be great if we had some sort of explanation, some sort of hand-wavy, well, you know, God works in mysterious ways. You know, if we can have this like God of the gaps that fills in all of these spaces and can make our uneven remainders make more sense. Because in the real world, existentially, we don't find a lot of ones and zeros. We find a lot of 0.9834762s and a lot of 0.2498s and all of these things that just don't conveniently like round and fit into neat boxes. And our brains just aren't equipped to chase down every single detail and to create like a fully unified theory of everything. And so when we encounter something that we just don't quite understand, it's really nice having something to just level off that uneven remainder and being able to call that thing God and being able to find a sense of like virtuousness and a sense of like faith and even morality by embracing that lack of capacity on our own end. It feels a whole lot better than admitting that we don't know what we're talking about or that we're overwhelmed by a particular idea.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. First of all, kudos, by the way, Christy, for working in the math examples into your
Yeah, I know that
yeah.
hard science people really love when us liberal arts humanities folks take these scientific metaphors and dumb them down.
Right. We're so proud. We're so proud. Stephen, I wanted you to see if you could comment on that. Christy was talking about the idea of really basically what it boils down to is safety and comfort, you know, and I think a lot of that has to do with things like compartmentalization, the way that we can separate different subjects in our mind and apply different standards to those different compartments. I know that you are a recovering religious person as well.
Yeah.
What is your experience with that idea of compartmentalization? I can't even say it.
Like for me, what's triggering for me, and not in what's synchronizing for me, is that idea, like when I look back on myself, my former like Mennonite evangelical background, and the way that I used to think of the world, view the world, and how I look at myself now, like I know that I have come a long way, and my thinking has been refined a lot, and I've really busted open a lot of those compartmentalizations that I used to depend on for understanding the world, and now I can accept the world on its actual terms a whole lot better. And also, I can be aware that I've got blind spots. I don't know where they are. I don't know what they are, but there are things about myself, my thinking patterns that I am just unaware of. So, as much as I want to pat myself on the back for being so logical and so intellectual and so skeptical now compared to back in the days, like if I would just like get outside of myself and view like a 24-hour videotape of myself and all of my subconscious things that I have no idea of, things that are not motivated by logic, I think I would feel very uncomfortable realizing so much of that stuff is still operating within me. So that's why whenever I want to get on my high horse and be like, oh, these dumb religious people, oh, if only they would start thinking like me, I can give myself a little pop and realize, oh wait, you know what? There's all kinds of stuff that I am not, that I haven't conquered, that I haven't improved upon yet, and we're all on our own separate tracks. And honestly, I don't know what's going on inside that religious person's brain. Maybe this is a part of their identity, but maybe it isn't. Maybe there's so many different flavors, so many different varieties of religious folks, that the important thing is that they're doing the best with their journey that they can do, just like I am doing the best journey that I can do. And yeah, hopefully this person with the background in psychiatry is being critical in their thinking, especially in how they are helping other people. And if they aren't lining up to my personal view of logical thinking, well, I can just take my personal view and keep it to myself, because that's who it has to matter to the most ultimately.
Yeah, there's one of those very... Oh, I'm sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
I wasn't trying to insinuate that I think that religious people are dumb or anything. I don't think that's true.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to circle
um,
that because I think sort of implied in your question is this very scary idea that there are incredibly smart people who believe really ridiculous things. And, like Stephen said, it's very tempting to take that mental shortcut on this side of the aisle and just say, oh, well, they must be dumb. But that's clearly not the case. And we need to be willing to recognize that and step away from that tempting confirmation bias and bit of, misinformation that people who believe these ridiculous things are somehow inherently less intelligent, because that's just not the reality.
No, I don't think it's about intelligence so much. I think it's more about whether someone is being given the authority to ask those questions.
Yeah,
Like,
no, that's a
whether
fine
it's
point.
encouraged or whether it's shamed. Yeah.
Yeah, if you ask these questions, does it mean that you're going to be ostracized from your family? Does it mean
Right.
that you're going to be shunned and excluded from your community? Does it mean that you are going to lose your sense of identity, your comfort and safety for the future, the ticket to heaven and paradise, the opportunity to have the love and support of an all-powerful God? These are all things that come up on the chopping block if you're willing to like be really critical of these ideas.
The last thing I wanted to kind of elaborate on, I won't take too much of your time. This is something I never understood even when I was religious, is like, is it all in their head when someone's speaking, quote, speaking in tongues, or is it just a bad Adam Sandler impression?
Ooh, can I go
Good
on
question.
and on and on about this question? Do y'all have any thoughts?
The closest I've ever come to
Adam
speaking in
Sandler
tongues was
impression.
in costume as a minister. So I have zero experience with speaking in tongues.
Sure.
Stephen,
Well, yeah, Stephen, please.
Yeah, no, whatever. So much of my background is Mennonite, and that's not a part of that realm, but I have had some experiences outside of that, and yeah, it was a part of my deconstruction process. Like this idea, like, oh, wait a minute, you're doing this, and now you're providing the interpretation, and everyone's just going with it. Nobody's thinking critically about this. Ah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand the question that you're asking, Lisa, but I guess I do want to take a quick moment just to point out that everything is in your head, that everything is in these people's heads. And so that doesn't make it exceptional, but is it grounded in reality? I guess what I am trying to suggest here is there's no doubt some number of people who get up at a crusade in a parking lot or at a revival at a church or just at an honest like random Tuesday at the evangelical churches I grew up in, and then start speaking in tongues in a way that is knowingly performative and fake. I'm not going to rule out that such things exist, but I will really suggest that I think the vast majority of people who are having that experience believe that they are having that experience or that the Holy Spirit is moving through them. And it has so much to do with the way our brains are sort of divided. We like to think that we know what we're thinking. We like to think that we are operating from a unified self, when the reality is our nervous system, our soul, quote unquote, is really just a gorbillion different nerve endings all stacked on top of each other, wearing a trench coat. Like, we are in many ways divided against ourselves, and it is not that difficult to dissociate between your mouth and your brain, to start babbling and feel like you are speaking, to feel like you are being moved by the power of the Spirit or that the Lord is speaking through you, when really it is just another part of your biology, part of your nervous system that is operating somewhat independent of the ego, of the self. And we don't need to get too bogged down into like consciousness research around it all, but I think that it is a very, very tempting lie to trick yourself into. And it's one that comes with a lot of social pressure. And most often when people are speaking in tongues or having those kinds of experiences, it is in a, sweaty, crowded, poorly lit church setting where there is loud music that is swelling and there are strong emotions moving, and there is a group of other people who are also singing and crying and dancing, and when there's just large bits of emotion that are really being out in the open like that, something that we as humans rarely experience, it can be very mesmerizing and easy to fall into.
The thing that angers me about it, and like whatever, is when I see people do that and then they start, they just fall on the ground and they pretend that they're shaking or something. And it's like, as an epileptic, I find that extremely disgusting.
Sure. I appreciate that.
But
Out of
yeah,
curiosity, Lisa, if you don't mind me asking, you said before that you were a Catholic before. What was your experience when you deconverted? I mean, if we're looking at, I mean, I would agree with what Christy had to say in that it's not necessarily a question of intelligence that we're talking about. I think it's just a matter of having skills. For example, I don't know how to fly a commercial airliner. That's not because I'm an idiot. It's because I just never learned how to do it. And I think that critical thinking is one of those things we need to practice. But what was your, when you first deconverted, did you look back at your previous self and think, oh, how dumb was I? Or what was your reflection on that moment in your life?
No, I didn't look back and say how dumb I was. Because I think when you're growing up in the faith, there are guardrails onto what you're allowed to ask and what you're not. And there's a lot of influence. But I think that, well, I didn't, when I started deconstructing, it was, I went away from Catholicism, but I was still open to the idea that there could be something out there. But I was away from an organized, specific religion, so to speak. But
so tell us a little bit more about what brought you to where you are now. Then, so you left the Catholic faith and still had some sort of maybe vague or amorphous beliefs. Maybe you weren't sure about them. What kind of helped you step through that?
Well, I have a degree in religious studies, so studying different world traditions and dissecting them as best as you can from an objective point of view helped me dissect some of the logical inconsistencies within Christianity itself. And the more I read the Bible and the more I heard people try to justify certain passages and blah, 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 how people would double down on things that just simply don't make sense. The more I was like, okay, I can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I just kind of have to accept that I don't believe in that stuff anymore. Or at the very least, I don't believe in, I'm still in a position where I'm just like, could there be a God? Sure. Do I believe that the evidence that has been given to me about their gods will convince me? No. Mm-hmm. I'm not, like, I could absolutely be wrong. There could be a God, but based on the information that I've been given and I also I minored in philosophy, so that really helped as well.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So, basically, the more I studied religion, the more it was unconvincing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's awesome. I think that shows great courage on your behalf. I think that you highlight one of the challenges. We were talking before about how there's things like peer pressure and family. If everybody believes something, we have strong motivations to try to fit in with other people, and so that can be strongly motivational to push us into believing those things. And very often we'll hear stories just like yours, where somebody was in a group setting where their entire family and friend circle was either explicitly or even implicitly applying pressure to go along with their beliefs. But the voyage out from that was by yourself, right? It was your own studying. I mean, you had your courses and so forth, but the voyage itself was something that you had to navigate on your own. And I think that can be very, very frightening to people when they're facing this kind of thing, even if they can intellectually grapple with the ideas of, well, maybe there's not a God, or maybe I should shore up my beliefs a little bit more strongly, or maybe I should investigate this line of reasoning or something along those lines. It's easy to have those kind of thoughts, but it's difficult to actually sit down and do it, because you're leaving the safety of your family and friends and then kind of voyaging out on your own. Lisa, I really appreciate your call. We do have other callers on, so I think I want to move on. Unless you have anything else you want to throw in at the end here, Lisa.
No, I'm glad for the conversation. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate the
talking
call,
to you.
Lisa.
Yeah, take care.
Okay, now we do have a caller on TikTok. We're going to bring them up in just a moment, but before we do that, we would like to share with you our crew. Right? It's not just myself and Christy, and even Steven. All of us
Or
can't.
even Steven.
Even Steven, right? We don't put on this whole show just the three of us, right? We have a whole slew of people that are working behind us. So let's see if we can go to the crew cam. Whoa, huge crew today. All right, look at that. If you would like to be one of these attractive crew members, or like Greg, be a guest on one of our shows, or eventually even become a host, we're always looking for people interested in being part of our productions. So email volunteer@atheist-community.org to get involved. If you also want to support us, there's other ways you can do that. You can support us by sending super chats. So get them in. We'll read them on the air if you want to give us a super chat. Other things that you can do, you can join our weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library. The ACA has a building. It's a really cool building, too. And it's called the Free Thought Library. And on Sundays there, we have live viewings of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. And I believe Truth Wanted as well, now that that's on Sundays as well. The doors open there at noon, and it's a great place for building community. Also, if you're in the Austin area, you can follow us on Meetup to keep up with community events. You can see what's going on at aca.show/meetup, and things like Philosophy Under the Stars, which to me sounds like the most fascinating thing I could ever do in an evening, is just philosophizing under the stars. That sounds so awesome. And we have game nights and much more there. So there's all those ways that you can support us. And sorry, I'm a little thrown off here. We just temporarily lost Christy, but hopefully he'll be back soon. In the meanwhile, Stephen and I will begin our chatting with Chloe Tart, our TikToker. Chloe, just before we begin here, I just want to verify, are you 18 years of age or older? Chloe, are you with us, Chloe? Chloe, can you hear me? All right. Well, we'll look into that. In the meanwhile, I just want to take a moment here, since we're talking about supporting the ACA. I want to mention another way that you can support us is through Patreon. And so what I'd like to do now is just recognize our top 5 patrons from this past week. And our top 5 patrons are: number 1, Oops, All Singularity; number 2, Dingleberry Jackson; number 3, Kalevi Helveti; number 4, my personal favorite, Period, just a period character; and number 5, Casey Kuykendall. And then we have an honorable mention at number 6, Andrew Murdoch. So thank you to everyone who gives to us on Patreon. If you want to have your name read on the air, then please consider supporting us at aca.show/PatreonTH. So, Stephen, as long as I got your ear here, your audience with
Scott.
we talked a little bit about psychological vulnerabilities that might induce us to embrace misinformation. We talked a little bit about confirmation bias, and for those of our listeners who don't know what confirmation bias is, that's the tendency that we have to notice the hits and not noticing the misses. For example, last night I was having a campfire out in my backyard, and my wife said, "The smoke always follows me." And so she would sit on one side, and then she says, "Watch this." And she'd get up and she'd walk around to the other side of the fire, and then the smoke started going that way. And I just asked her, "We've been sitting here for an hour and a half, and you show me 5 seconds of the smoke following you." So that would be an example of confirmation bias. And I said, "We're talking about confirmation bias on the show tomorrow, and I'm going to mention you. So sorry if you're out there. There's your mention. So shout out to you."
Put it on blast. That's good for your marriage, right?
There we go, right?
should write a book.
Exactly. But there's also these other, so in addition to confirmation bias, there are other things that happen, like the backfire effect. The backfire effect is what happens if somebody's presented facts or evidence against their strongly held beliefs, they can very often kind of double down and,
Mm.
I'm gonna, do that. I'm gonna disagree even more intensely. So, Stephen, what are your thoughts on those psychological vulnerabilities that might induce us in that direction?
Yeah, yeah, I've heard of those and it makes sense. Like like just understanding the way your brain works and why your brain works the way that it does, it's fascinating. And it's so pertinent to anybody with a brain, which is why I know, wild, right?
That's most of
Uh,
us.
but like, and it's for that reason I really hope, and I don't know if you have any feelings about this, Christy, but I really wish that we could destigmatize like just getting mental health support, like getting counseling, getting psychiatric help, because we all have a brain and we all have these things that are going on in the background that we don't fully understand. And it's so easy for us to feel isolated in that, right? And just the idea of like, hey, there are people out there who understand psychology and people out there who understand why your brain is thinking the way that it is. And if they can share that information, that can
Right.
be so powerful to you in understanding your own ways that you're thinking. This is why I'm doubling down. This is why I'm responding to your facts in such a fashion.
Right.
Like,
Right.
why can't we just lean into that?
Christy, I wanted to ask you, spinning off of what Stephen was just saying. You're a therapist. I know this isn't necessarily your area of expertise within the therapy field, but maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into why are people so resistant to learn new things? I mean, why do we cling to those firmly held beliefs? Why do we, even in the face of evidence, double down on that kind of thing? Oh, are we? We don't have any audio for you there, Christy's. I think the Lord has smitten your microphone.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Now you're hearing me.
We got you. All right.
Beautiful. Okay. Yeah. Well, so in order to answer your question, I'm struck by what Stephen was saying about mental health support and why do I think this way, and what is it that's sort of wrong with my brain that I have these biases or these assumptions. And I think the word "I" is doing a lot of heavy lifting there. Because when something with our body isn't working the way that we expect it to, my digestion is off, I'm not sleeping well, we have these challenges that we experience as a person that exists in a body, but we think of it in those terms. I exist in this body. This is my body. We don't necessarily think of our body as I, as me, as really who I am. But when we're talking about our mind, when we're talking about our mental health, now that's suddenly very personal. I mean, it's as bone deep as you can really get, right? When we think about our own cognitive biases, when we think about our cognitive biases being sort of hardened into a personality, that's as I as it gets, which is one reason why there's so much stigma around mental health care, because we can sort of distance ourselves and say like, oh, my stomach just isn't working the way that it's supposed to, or oh, my leg is broken. But we're really uncomfortable with acknowledging, oh, my cognitive bias is showing. Oh, my personality is a little bit disordered or is traumatized in these sorts of ways. And we really feel attacked when we're confronted with information that goes against what we think we know, when it goes against our sense of identity, because we do carry these things so deeply and it's so close to our identity and our personality.
So would you say it's like a fight or flight trigger? I mean, is that kind of the response?
Yeah, I mean,
If
it
somebody's
certainly
attacking my
can be.
identity, I can either run away or I can attack you.
Right. If somebody comes to us with a piece of information that flies in the face of everything that we have understood about ourselves, about our universe, if it contradicts things that we directly have said or pledged allegiance to, then there is this desire to fight that thing, to come back and disagree with it as hard as we possibly can. And the more we find ourselves disagreeing with something, the more we are just repeating the talking points. And that gives us even more investment in these things that we don't want to let go of. If I find myself arguing with you and telling you all the reasons why you're wrong, well, I'm also listening to me too.
Right.
I'm hearing the words that are coming out of my mouth. And even if they're coming from this sort of like disconnected, dissociated part of myself, once I've said them, I feel this obligation to incorporate them into the I, to bring them
Right.
into sort of the center of consciousness, more about identity and ego and personality.
So it's kind of like face saving, but to yourself, right? You got to save
Right,
face in your own
exactly.
eyes.
Yeah, exactly. You are, of course, trying to not be embarrassed in front of the person that you're in contention with, if it feels like an argument, and these kinds of things of wanting to still be impressive and smart and well regarded. But first and foremost, we want to be well regarded by ourselves as someone who isn't wishy washy, as somebody
Right.
who doesn't go off half cocked and knows what the hell they're talking about.
Exactly, exactly. Oh, I'm being told from the booth that we have Chloe back. So Chloe is joining us on TikTok. Chloe, I just want to verify before we start here that you are 18 or older. Is that correct?
I'm 43.
43. So that's definitely, I can tell you as a math teacher, 43 greater than 18. So awesome. So thank you. Chloe, what's on your mind today?
So originally I came up to discuss the prompt on the show for tonight, but with Lisa's call, it actually made me think a little bit more about, I'm a theist, I'm a pagan. It made me think more about, coming up with that explanation of why otherwise smart people would believe when there's no evidence for it. And for my case, I can't speak to this isn't universal. For my case, it was a matter of answering a call in my own head, in my own heart, that there was something to this pagan belief, specifically Norse paganism, that felt like home. It felt comfortable. The community felt right. Everything felt right. And it's a whole morass of feelings that, I try to logically work out. But the more I try to logically suss it out, the more elusive, a logical answer becomes. And I'm left kind of twisting in the wind with, only the support of my community to telling me, yeah, it's actually like that. It's, faith is just like that. Our stories say one thing, science says another. Believe science, but also understand that whatever it is that calls to you in the stories matters to you. Because for me, when you got like Egil Saga and you're talking about like peace between warring tribes, that speaks to me. When you've got stories of honor and you've got stories like, the saga of I'm sorry, the name's for striking me. It's the one with Sigurd and the dragon, and reaching up and, fighting the dragon against impossible odds, even though it's hard. Something about that story speaks to me, even if that story isn't literally true.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
there is
I
a bit
hear
of
that. And
compartmentalization.
when
there.
I told Lisa that everything is in your head, and so we need to sort of embrace that. I think I want to say to you, Chloe, that everything is a story. That no matter how many data points we have, when we experience it, like at the level of consciousness, we are taking all of these data points and assembling them into a narrative. That's just the way our brain encodes things and makes things make sense and fit. And it can be very easy for that story that we are telling to become detached from, what we might call objective reality. And we can get into the solipsism and all of the ideas around that. But this notion of the story being sort of knowingly divorced from truth is something that I just want to continue to encourage to circle for you. I very much appreciate why it feels like there is value here, and you want to kind of follow that feeling. And I don't mean to strawman you or to oversimplify things, but in past conversations between you and I, we kind of came to this idea that it just feels right, it just feels good, and that there's almost this temptation to have like a little bit of delusion as a treat, so long as you don't let it carry you away or get you into trouble in the way that you vote or interact with people or the way that you spend money, then what could really the harm be? Is it okay for me to frame everything in that language and to sort of bring in those past conversations in that way?
Sure, but that might not be useful for the audience who may not be aware of those past conversations.
Well, sure, but am I accurately
But you're-
describing some of your positions here? Because I do want to be mindful about putting words in your mouth.
I would say that's copper manning, and not quite a steel man, but clearly very sturdy and rugged enough. It's good enough for this conversation where we can have a little bit of nonsense in our lives as long as it doesn't take over, as you said. Because like I said, I'm chasing a feeling, and I know I'm chasing a feeling. And, maybe that makes me different from other theists who are not really honest with themselves, that, something about the God concept calls to them, and they're not willing to be forthright about it. They're confusing that for objective truth. Because it is true that we are having these feelings, but these feelings themselves are not reflective of truths in the world. So when I use these truths to get to things like honor and reciprocity and hospitality, that's kind of the same mechanism that some people get to homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, and all these other things. So
Chloe, I have a
matter
question
of-
for you. How do you balance you're talking about the thought of being emotionally satisfied, or the feeling of safety, or the feeling of knowledge, or however you would describe that happiness or that good feeling that you're talking about. How do you balance that between, is there a desire to be truthful as well? And I understand that it's not a cut and dry. It's not truth good, feeling bad, right? It's there can be a gray area in between. But how do you approach that? How do you're somebody who actually recognizes that that's what you're doing, and I'm curious if you could enlighten to us a little bit, or maybe there's other people watching that might be in a similar situation who are having difficulty navigating those particular waters. How do you do that? How do you balance those two concepts, truth versus feeling good?
Well, we have. I do it by acknowledging that the feeling itself is true. That I am having this feeling is true, and that is where I start, and that is not where I end. It is, what in the world can I take from this feeling and bring it into this world of truth and fact and all of that. It's like I said, I've called before. I've had this conversation before with different hosts. But the overall feeling that I'm chasing is grounded in, hey, don't forget to pay your taxes. Don't forget to wash your dishes. Don't forget to do your laundry. Don't forget you are still human and you are still mortal.
Mm-hmm.
And, you have to balance it the best you can. And unfortunately, some people don't balance it very well. And it's not on them. It's not a mark on them for not doing that, because these feelings can be so overpowering, so overwhelming, that they overwhelm the neocortex, the basis for logical thought in our brain.
Right.
And when that happens, how do you take responsibility when your brain is wired to do something in the face of feelings? And then, you have this other part of you that's going along for the ride, that logical part of you that's like, hey, maybe this isn't right. Hey, maybe we're doing something wrong. We're not focused on reality. Once that gets drowned out, it gets all topsy-turvy, and you have to do the best you can to get grounded again and remain grounded while still reaching out towards what I consider bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
Things beyond us, whether that's community, whether that's honor, personal honor, whether that's, the gods or spirits or ancestors, these things that are beyond us. you have to do the best you can, knowing you will get it wrong. You'll have an experience that might make you think something that might not be totally in full with reality, but you also have to realize that experience also happened. And it's like, it's almost not worth it. But if not for that urge that is, I hate to describe it as primal, but I have no other words for like that hindbrain desire for something mystical and experiential.
Yeah, I
Right.
don't think
Yeah, for that
calling it
experience.
primal is necessarily out of line, and I'll acknowledge that there are whole branches of psychology that sort of lean into these ideas. You know, certain forms of narrative therapy or of imagination, and just play therapies where we describe stories differently than they happened knowingly. And when we create these opportunities to like have conversations and do role plays that are not actually happening, just in order to kind of like stretch and flex those muscles and reset those nerves so that we can have the experience of as if it happened or if it had happened. And I don't think that those are problematic ideas. I don't like, it kind of comes down to what we mean by the word believe. Because as I hear you talking about all of this, Chloe, you're like, well, I know it's not true, but I sort of feel it. And I know that a movie isn't true, but I still feel it. And I think where it gets dangerous, where we get lost in the sauce, is when that line starts to break down in ways that we don't have control over. But the way you're describing it, I don't know if we can necessarily even separate out what you're saying from, the old adage of, I want to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible.
Right. And for me, getting to those true things, like there are some true things, like I said, like honor, hospitality, reciprocity, which you can't neatly scientifically get to. You can't just like look at an atom and figure out like, oh, I need to be good to other people. You figure that out through life experience, through culture, through exchange, through social means. I like to describe science as describing the outside world and religion describing the inside world. And those are, and when the outside world and the inside world meet is where the rubber hits the road in terms of like skepticism and in terms of like mindedness of how are you minded in this world.
Yeah, I hear that kind of Galilean
to be that
split,
true?
and I guess it makes me curious what you do with the humanities. Is psychology the science of the inside world on some level? And can we explore this inside world in ways that are a little bit more scientifically minded, that are a little bit more skeptical, that are a little bit more based on principles of data collection and hypothesis falsification and some of these kinds of principles?
Absolutely. But that's one of those things that really bit me in the butt when I was converting out of atheism into theism, because what ultimately cemented that was, first listening to that call all my life and ignoring it. And then when I finally paid attention to it, it started paying off benefits psychologically. Like I've mentioned here on the show before, pagan goddess worship is really good for my gender dysphoria. I'm trans.
Yeah.
My voice doesn't betray it, but my voice betrays that. But, once I had that experience and then I repeated it over and over again, and I could say for fairly certain that when I spend 5 minutes meditating on Freya, it's going to make me feel better about myself and my body. What do I do with that?
Yeah.
How does that fit into the scientific milieu?
I know I've been dominating parts of this
again.
conversation, so I'll just offer this one more time, that I don't necessarily see that as a problem. Like I myself, and I think you and I have maybe talked about this, Chloe, but for the audience and for Scott and Steven, like I participate in a practice called metta meditation. And this is a very traditional Buddhist practice that also has a significant amount of what I'm just going to very lazily call like Western research laboratory data behind it, where you are effectively wishing people well, where you are offering hopes, or if we want to call them this, prayers to the universe or whatever, that the people that you care about, the people around you, that the world at large would be happy, would feel safe, would be comfortable. And there is good data supporting, and I have my own personal experience of coming out of that experience feeling more kindly, feeling more happy, feeling more at peace, feeling more equipped to offer generosity to the people around me. And I participate in that practice knowing full good goddamn well that I'm not actually manifesting anything, that I'm not asking the universe to make my wife happy, even as I'm sitting here with my eyes closed, going, may she be happy. May she live comfortably. Like, nothing is happening in any sort of metaphysical way, but it makes me feel better, and it wires my nervous system to be oriented towards things that might make her happy, or that ways that I can participate in her happiness, or that I can just become the type of person who is more kind and generous. And so if you're telling me that these practices are beneficial to you and that you need to sort of suspend disbelief to participate in them, by all means, just be thoughtful about not getting lost in the sauce and recognizing that this is a narrative story that you're telling and not a literally factually true one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I even extend that to my own mythology, where it may be, I'm of the position that these stories may or may not be true, but they are the stories that we tell about the gods, and that is true. This is what we think of the gods. This is the opinions and the feelings and the, everything else going on. That it is part of that narrative, but that narrative is not true, but it is true. It contains truths.
Yeah. So Scott and Steven, how comfortable are y'all with some of these like targeted, intentional, compartmentalized suspensions of disbelief? How is any of this sitting for the two of you?
Well, for me, as a teacher, maybe this is one of the reasons I became a teacher, is that I'm just fascinated to hear how people come to their conclusions. What's your thought process in doing that? And here I see, and I apologize, Chloe, if I'm oversimplifying your view here, but it's kind of like what I'm hearing is it's okay to accept this certain amount of untruth in my beliefs, as long as it's making me feel good. And that sounded kind of antagonistic, and it wasn't intended to be that way. There's a balance there. And I think we all have that balance in many aspects of our lives. For one example, when it comes to morality, to doing the right thing, we might have feelings that one particular thing is right, but we only have so much emotional capital that we can invest in making those changes. It's difficult to change every aspect of your life. It's difficult to maintain your standards across all areas of your life at all the time, And so I do see value in Chloe, in your approach. I do see value in taking your own feeling and your own perspective into consideration when determining these things. And it sounds to me like you have a pretty healthy approach to it. And the bottom line for me, that's what matters, is what's motivating you. Why are you doing this? What do you care about? If you care about people and are interested in moving, making things better for people, or if you're interested in truth and you're interested in promoting truth, and if you're interested in people being happy and want to pursue that as well, I think there can be good balance, and there can be healthy balance in there as well. Stephen, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah. Like for me, like I echo so much of what y'all have been saying. I know for myself, I spent so much time with the feelings being the compass for me. Like I can, especially after my time in Bible college, where like, okay, intellectually, I'm really struggling to maintain this belief. But you know what? I still got the feels, and the feels are what I will hold on to now. And this feels true. This feels spiritual. This feels like it's of a higher frequency or whatever. Uh, and then it was, yeah, the devastation of saying, wait a minute, these feels are just feels, and these feels are
Right.
going to change. This is not the right compass for me to be using. I can say that that is part of my journey, where I want to anybody to throw up a flag anytime I'm using my feelings as what is pointing me towards truth. Um, and like then at the same time being cool with people who have different life experiences and different compasses and used compasses differently than myself. Like for me, the biggest thing about how our beliefs interact with us is how they interact with the world. And if someone's belief is making them a better person without negative drawbacks, well, that's the biggest piece that I can ask for. And whatever their journey is from there, that's I hope that they have a healthy journey with an even greater trajectory.
Well said. Well said. Chloe, I appreciate your call. We do have some other callers, and we're kind of running short on time, so I don't mean to cut you short here, but I appreciate that you called and we're talking to about this, and I hope you have a great day today, Chloe.
Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
All right. All right. So next up in the queue, we do have somebody on TikTok right now that we want to go to by the name of pmars.kg or something along those lines. So TikToker, if you're on with us, help me pronounce your name correctly there. And
Yes,
also we
correct.
want to verify that you are 18 or older.
I am 18 or over. Yeah, that's the correct PMARS or Mars.
So just PMars?
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
All right. So what do you want to talk to us today about PMars?
I guess I kind of had a comment on sort of what you guys were talking about. So I kind of agree that I think we all have a bias. You could say like a narrative or like a story through which we sort of filter everything. I think that's consistent with like psychology and even philosophy.
Sure.
So I think for me as a Christian, obviously my narrative is, you guys have access to it. You can go read. Right?
I think it's publicly available. I think.
Yeah. Well, so then I think the question is, well, since we all kind of have this filter, this bias, it's unavoidable. It's like, well, what narrative story is the correct narrative story? And I think if we do an examination, as far as I can tell, the only one that makes sense to me is the Bible, because in the Bible we have like truth itself, or like the authority of truth is a person who was a God that becomes a person and like speaks to us clearly. So like in that narrative, we actually have access to the truth. And then if you deny that, it's kind of, you're in a boat where, well, you don't have access to the truth, and now you're in the skepticism boat. And then
Right.
now,
Well, let's look at that a little bit more closely. I appreciate that you recognize that we all have biases. I think we would all agree. Anybody who has a human brain is going to have human biases, and so the fact that we can recognize that's a great first step in counteracting misinformation, is recognizing our vulnerability in that regard. And so you asked a great question. How do we decide whose narrative is factually true? And we have to do that knowing what our biases are. So you were saying that there was some reasoning that you can give us to justify taking the Christian perspective over an atheistic perspective, that there is no gods. And so tell me more about this idea of a truth being a person. I'm not exactly sure what you mean. What does it mean when you say truth is a person?
well, I mean, we could think, you brought up facts. So like, I would say that our bias would inform our facts. Like it's impossible to divorce facts from the bias. And so
Okay.
if you take a Christian bias, your facts like have a father, an origin, like facts come from Jesus. The non.
So what does that mean?
I mean,
What does that mean?
Sounds nice. Like I can appreciate why you would want that.
Right.
Well, Jesus tells us personally, like that he upholds and sustains like reality. So every
He's the way,
fact-
the truth, and the life.
right. And so facts would either like have a father in heaven, or facts are orphans, right? And like,
But that's what I'm asking. I'm confused. I'm confused. I don't know what it means for a fact to have a father.
like if you ask me, well, what makes a fact true? Ultimately, I would say, well, Christ. Christ is the authority. Christ decides what's true and false. He's the authority.
So it's a subjective truth.
Well, it's not subjective because God would be the ultimate objective absolute, because God's unchanging, eternal.
But you said the key feature there was that God was a person, and it's the person's perspective that's making this true, right? So if it were objectively true, then it wouldn't matter what God said.
Well, God would be
Right?
the objective. No, well, without God, there's no objective truth. There'd be no objective reference point. You'd only have human minds. So God would be necessary to even have an objective reference point.
But well, according to the way that you're defining truth, you're saying that
no, it's not about definition.
God. Sorry, what?
It doesn't matter how you define. It's about so like there's the definition of a basketball, but a basketball gets meaning from like the physical basketball. So
Right, but the basketball doesn't matter what anybody calls it. It's still going to be the basketball. It has an objective reality there. And it doesn't matter if we call it a basketball or if we call it something else, right?
Yeah, the word's just a label. Like, well, definitions come from us. Like, so definitions aren't necessarily true. Like,
Right, but we're speaking here, so we don't want to just make noises at each other, right? The idea is that we're using our words to convey concepts, and so that's really what I'm asking about. And so if you're saying that objective means that it doesn't require a subject.
Well, if you ask me, like,
right? Or are you thinking something else?
Well, the subject depends. Like, so that would apply to human minds, but that doesn't necessarily apply to the mind of God, because of the type of subject matters, not just the fact that it is a subject.
Okay, and why is that different?
Because if something's like unchanging, eternal, universally true, we would say that's objectively true. Like 2 + 2 = 4 is unchanging, universal, objective truth.
Right. So if something is unchanging and universal, then it doesn't require God.
But that would be objective. So like God has those properties. So God is the ultimate objective absolute because of his properties.
I think you're going around in circles. Okay.
Yeah.
If you use a capital S on the subject, that doesn't make it objective, right? It's still a subject.
I'd like to ask it this way, if I can. Let's just, for the moment, acknowledge or allow that God is truly objective and the unending, unalterable truth. Aren't you still experiencing that truth through the subjective lens of human consciousness?
Yeah, I'm fallible, right? But
okay. So if the basketball is a basketball is a basketball, aren't you also experiencing that through the subjective lens of human consciousness?
Yeah, but facts are either first interpreted by the mind of God and they're objective, or facts are first interpreted by the human mind and they're subjective.
Okay, so this facts being interpreted by a mind ingredient, I don't know how it fits into our flowchart here.
Well, your truth is something your mind aligns with and it comes from God, or truth is something that comes from a human mind that humans create.
So if I believe something, if I hold an idea in my head, if I am like picturing an apple and a basketball, it's possible that one of those ideas is true and in alignment with God, and one of those ideas is just generated by my own human fallibility.
I think, yeah, like what, in my view, Jesus makes something true if something's true. In your view, truth would have to come from like a human mind.
how do you know which things are in your head because God put them there and which are in your head because your fallible human subjective consciousness altered them?
That goes to the story when we compare our narratives. Like, so we both have a narrative, and in my narrative, God,
You get to be right about certain things because a bunch of ancient poetry told you that you were.
why should I accept your narrative when your narrative doesn't even give us access to truth? It makes truth a guessing game. Why would I believe that?
I mean, that's wonderful to ask. Like, it goes right back to what I said at the beginning, that it would be really nice to believe that there was this guy, this God, that made things objectively true and that we could hold firm in that. And that would feel really nice. But beyond the fact that it is tempting, beyond the fact that it would be cool or that it would be useful, does that any of that make it true?
Was it better to dogmatically assert the Church of I don't know?
That's a great point. Excellent point there.
Sure.
Not an answer, but
I'm still I'm still unclear on this idea of truth coming from somewhere. I mean, to me, when I say the word true, what I mean is if a statement aligns with reality, it's true. Now, that true didn't have a father.
But that's a
That
theory of
true
truth.
didn't flow from somewhere. It's a
That's a
simple
theory of truth.
correspondence that either is actual or not.
but what-
If I
what-
say there are two apples on my table, there is a reality, unless you're disagreeing that we have an
Well, but
that
you're giving
there
me-
is an
you're giving
objective
me-
reality. But if the statement aligns with what is actually the case, then it's true, and that makes it a truth, right? It's not. But you're saying that truth aligns
No.
with
I'm
what
not
God
disagreeing.
says, and I'll give you a second here. If you're saying that truth aligns with what God does, that's kind of you're begging the question there, right? He's saying, well, truth is what God says, and so therefore what God says is true. I
When
mean,
you say
I'm
that-
missing
okay.
something here. Can you help explain to me
Yeah,
what you mean when you say those words?
You're kind of focusing on the theory of truth when we say, like, well, truth is what corresponds to reality or something like that. I mean, I could get
Okay.
on board with that. That's fine. But the question is, like, what authority, determines the state of affairs? Like, what authority determines what in reality is true?
So you think there is no objective reality?
No, I think, like, if you ask me what is the authority of truth, I can say Jesus Christ. And if I ask you the same
I
question,
don't understand what that means. I don't know what you mean when you say Jesus Christ is the authority of truth. I don't know what that means. Do you mean that Jesus gets to say what the word truth means? Or do you think that the universe aligns itself with what Jesus says in order to make something true? Like, what if Jesus said, there are, in fact, two apples on the table? Okay, does the fact that Jesus said that make it become truth? Or I mean, I don't see the connection there.
Because if our narratives inform what we see. So when I look at two apples on the table, I see two apples that exist. Their existence is imposed and sustained by Jesus Christ. You see two apples whose existence is imposed and sustained by I don't know.
Yeah.
That doesn't really clarify. Stephen, can you? Do you have anyone?
I think this is in parallel. Like Mars, can you refresh my memory? What happened to Elijah? What was the end of Elijah's story? Right before he kind of like gave over his mantle to Elijah. Do you recall?
Like he went on a chariot to heaven.
Okay, right. And if I said, no, that didn't happen, people don't get taken up into heaven in fiery chariots, would you say that I'm aligned with truth? Or would you say that the Bible is aligned with truth?
Well, yeah, I think the author of the Bible is truth itself. So,
gotcha. Okay, so then I'm not aligned with truth, but the author of the Bible is aligned with truth. Yeah.
The author of the Bible is the source of truth, and then in your story, you have no source of truth. It's a question.
No. Just like if we can just focus on answering the question I'm asking, be awesome. So what you're saying is that what the reality of truth is isn't what I'm saying. I'm not lined up with it. Truth is something other than what I'm saying, right?
Uh,
I say
I don't even
Elisha
know.
did not go up into heaven in a
Okay.
fiery chariot.
Yeah.
Am I
Yes.
truthful or am I wrong?
Yeah, that would be not aligned with truth. Yeah, correct.
Okay, what if it was Jesus saying, no, 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 Elisha did not go up into heaven? That did not happen. Would Jesus be truthful or would Jesus be wrong if he said that?
Well, but in my view, he's the author of the Bible. So is he saying
Yeah.
he lied?
Well, I don't know. If Jesus said, no, Elisha did not go into heaven,
That's
you
that's
said that when
kind
I said it, it's wrong. But if Jesus said it, would Jesus be right?
of the question's like forcing me into a contradiction.
Oh, uh-oh.
Well,
Because I know, like, was it John 3:13? What does Jesus
Well,
say there? No one has ever gone into heaven except for the one who came from heaven, the Son of
yes.
Man. So if
Yeah.
Jesus said no one has gone into heaven, and also the Bible says that Elijah went into heaven, I don't feel like I'm the one forcing you into a contradiction, but I feel like I'm kind of taking a highlighter and saying, um, let's think critically about this. I know our dogma wants to say that the Bible is univocal, that the Bible only says one unified message, but let's look at the facts and analyze that a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with that passage. What Jesus is talking about there is like he's the only one who has the power to come down from heaven and go up to heaven on his own power. Right. So that's not
It is something that you're adding to it, right?
no.
Well, the words are no one has ever gone into heaven. So it's not
So
no one
so
has
my Bible.
give,
So I'll just set my Bible study on fire then, I guess, because apparently all the theologians are wrong and you're right.
well, I'm just looking at the facts, buddy. I'm sorry.
Well,
If you
I
you
just
can
telling
you
you what the
can you can quit and
theologians.
cry,
So,
but like let's just be honest because you
this
want
is
to
what.
talk about truth.
Yeah, but theologians disagree with your interpretation. So should I just burn all the books I read that disagree with you
100% of them?
and just
I don't
Yeah,
know.
which ones?
you're the
And
truth
we're
then.
getting
So
right
what's the
back to
truth?
that
I'll
subjective
follow you.
component to
No,
it.
you're right.
You have to recognize that
Bible's
even
right.
if there is an objective truth and that truth is Jesus Christ, you are experiencing that through which books you read, through your own biases, through your own subjective lens.
Okay, so you guys are right. Now show me the way. So Jesus Christ isn't the truth. Now tell me, what is the truth? Show me the way, guys. What do I do?
I would,
I live my life.
I hear what you're asking, and I think I would
Yeah,
just
but offer
recommend abandon the idea of the truth.
You're right. No,
There
you're
is
right.
not a single
You're right.
unifying theory of everything about how you are supposed to live your life. And I get that that can be really terrifying. And I can appreciate why it would be really comforting to see all truth and all reality as like one specific person who is omnipresent and who loves you. I very much get why you would want that. And it is okay to want that. Does wanting it make it true?
No, what makes it true is the impossibility of the contrary, because if you deny Jesus is the truth, then would be in your situation where you don't even know what's true. And when I ask you, like,
to me, the sentence "Jesus is the truth" is barely a coherent sentence.
you have nothing to.
Okay, the truth. So you're saying the truth is a person. So what do you call statements that correspond with reality? What do you call those?
I would say truth is what corresponds to God's revealed.
No, I said, what do you call, if I say, here's a statement that corresponds with reality, what do you call that kind of statement?
Statement? What do you mean?
What word would you, is there a word you would use that? Would you describe it as something? Because I would call that as a true statement, but you're using the word true and truth to mean something different. So I'm curious as to, well, what about what I'm talking about? The idea of a concept corresponding with reality. What do you call that? You don't call that truth. You call something else truth. What would you call that? The idea of corresponding with reality.
I have no idea. Right now. I call it truth. What do you mean? We use the same word.
But you said truth was something else.
Scott, in the 90 seconds we have left, I'm not sure how much further we can.
Yeah, I can see we're getting a dwindling resources here, and that resource that is going away is time. So, Christy, thanks for calling me out on that. P. Mars, I appreciate your call. I really apologize that we're going to have to cut this call short. We are running short on time. We got about 30 seconds left in the show. But thank you so much for your call, P. Mars. I hope that you can call back in again some other time and continue your conversation either with us or with another host. We see the love rings are going out there. So all of you out there that are watching, remember that if you don't believe, this is your community and we appreciate you being here. But if you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
We want the truth. So watch Truth Wanted Live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect online at tiny.cc/call-TW.